In 2025, the world bought $3 trillion worth of oil. Almost every barrel of it was paid for in one currency. Not because that currency was the strongest, not because it was the most stable, not because some international body voted on it and decided it was fairest. Because of a secret deal made in a Saudi desert in 1974. You've been living inside this system your entire life. It shapes what your dollar is worth, what gas costs at the pump, why America can borrow money cheaper than any other country on Earth, and why certain world leaders who tried to step outside it ended up losing their governments, and in some cases, their lives. It's called the petrodollar, and it's the most powerful financial system most Americans have never been taught to understand. I'm Jimmy, and this is Finance Misfires. Let's go back to where it started. The 15th of August, 1971, President Nixon appears on national television and delivers one of the most consequential sentences in modern financial history. I have directed the suspension of the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Since World War II, every dollar had been backed by gold. Any country holding dollars could demand physical gold from America in return. The problem was, America had been printing far more dollars than it had gold to cover. Foreign governments noticed. One by one, they started showing up, asking for their gold back. Nixon slammed the window shut. The dollar was now backed by nothing except trust. Then things got dramatically worse. October 1973, the Yom Kippur War. America backed Israel. Arab oil producers retaliated by cutting production and embargoing the United States entirely. Oil prices exploded from $3 a barrel to nearly $12 overnight. Gas stations ran dry. Lines stretched for blocks. America now had a currency with no gold behind it, inflation spiraling, and the world's most critical commodity being weaponized against it simultaneously. Something had to change, fast. Enter Henry Kissinger, Secretary of State, arguably the most strategically cold-blooded diplomat America has ever produced. Kissinger flew to Saudi Arabia with a proposition that was equal parts brilliant and ruthless. The pitch went something like this: Your Majesty, you are sitting on the largest proven oil reserves on the planet, which is extraordinary. It also means you're sitting in the middle of the desert with a giant sign on your back that says, "Please invade me." Every regional power and rival government is looking at what you have and calculating whether they could take it. So here's the arrangement. You sell your oil exclusively in US dollars. You take the surplus dollars you accumulate and invest them back into US Treasury bonds and American financial markets. And in return, we protect you. We sell you the weapons. We station our military in the region. Anyone who wants to touch Saudi Arabia has to go through the United States first. In 1974, Saudi Arabia agreed. Within a year, the rest of OPEC fell in line. The petrodollar system was operational. Here's the actual machinery. 3 moving parts, running in a loop for 50 years. First, oil gets priced in dollars globally. Every country that needs energy, Japan, Germany, India, Brazil, must acquire dollars before they can buy oil. One agreement created permanent structural demand for American currency from every industrialized nation simultaneously. Second, oil exporters accumulate dollar surpluses far beyond what their domestic economies can absorb. Those surplus dollars flow right back into U.S. Treasury bonds and American financial markets. Petrodollar recycling, one of the least visible wealth transfer mechanisms ever constructed. Third, America uses that recycled capital to fund itself cheaply. Government spending, military operations, the same military protecting the oil fields that keep oil flowing in dollars that come back to America as investment. It's a self-reinforcing loop. America doesn't even need to produce the oil, it just needs the world to keep buying it in dollars. And for decades, the world had no real choice. Here's where the story gets genuinely uncomfortable, and I want to be straightforward about this. Correlation isn't always causation, and each of these situations had its own complex web of factors involved. But the pattern is hard to ignore. In 2000, Saddam Hussein announced Iraq would begin selling oil in euros instead of US dollars. 3 years later, Iraq was invaded. After Saddam fell, Iraqi oil sales returned to dollars. Muammar Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed African currency, the gold dinar, designed to replace the dollar in African oil trade. Libya held roughly 143 tons of gold to back the plan. In 2011, NATO intervened militarily. Gaddafi was killed. The gold dinar plan died with him. Venezuela, sitting on the largest proven oil reserves on the planet at 303 billion barrels, launched a cryptocurrency in 2018 specifically designed to bypass dollar sanctions and sell oil outside the dollar system. It went nowhere technically, but the defiance didn't go unnoticed. The U.S. ramped up sanctions, blockaded Venezuelan oil tankers, and in January 2026 launched a military operation that resulted in Maduro's capture. Trump publicly stated plans to rebuild Venezuela's oil infrastructure with American companies. The largest oil reserves on Earth, back on the table. 3 different leaders. 3 different decades. 3 different stated justifications for intervention. Same outcome for their dollar alternative plans. Were these conflicts caused solely by dollar challenges? Almost certainly not. Each had its own genuine mess of motivations, weapons concerns, regional politics, humanitarian arguments, drug trafficking. But the pattern across 50 years is consistent enough that dismissing it entirely requires a level of selective blindness that's hard to justify intellectually. Challenge the system, and the system pushes back. For decades, nobody could seriously challenge the petrodollar's grip. The system was too embedded, too liquid, too deeply wired into the global financial infrastructure for any realistic alternative to gain traction. Then in 2022, the United States did something that inadvertently handed every skeptical central bank on Earth the argument they've been waiting for. After Russia invaded Ukraine, Washington froze nearly $300 billion in Russian sovereign reserves and cut major Russian banks off from the SWIFT payment network, the messaging infrastructure that runs essentially all international banking. The move hurt Russia. That part worked as intended, but the signal it sent to every other government holding dollar reserves was something the architects of the petrodollar system probably didn't fully game out in advance. This money is only yours as long as Washington says it is. Decades of accumulated savings, parked in a system every central bank had been told was neutral and safe, made unreachable overnight by a single political decision. No court order, no international arbitration, one decision, and that realization cracked something open that hasn't closed since. What followed wasn't a dramatic overnight collapse of the dollar system. It was something quieter, more patient, and arguably more dangerous in the long run. China systematically reduced its U.S. Treasury holdings from over $1.3 trillion down to roughly $600 billion while accumulating gold to replace them. Russia and China pushed bilateral trade into yuan and rubles. Brazil and China settled trade directly in their own currencies. India paid for Russian oil in rupees. And Saudi Arabia, the country that built the petrodollar system alongside Kissinger in 1974, publicly stated it was open to accepting currencies other than the dollar for its oil sales. The founding partner of the entire arrangement is openly reconsidering the terms. The numbers confirm it. Dollar reserves fallen from 72% in 2001 to under 58% today. Central banks added over 1,000 tons of gold in 2024 alone. The yuan now represents roughly 2% of global reserves, essentially zero just a decade ago. And then there's the angle nobody in Washington wants to discuss: the electric vehicle transition. 1 in 4 cars sold globally in 2025 was electric. If physical oil demand erodes, structural dollar demand erodes with it. The petrodollar's foundation isn't political agreements or military guarantees. It's the world's dependency on fossil fuels. And that dependency is shifting for the first time in 50 years. Here's what I want you to take away from this, and I'll be straight with you the way I always am on this channel. The petrodollar isn't dead. Not even close. So where does all of this actually leave us? The dollar still dominates 88% of foreign exchange transactions globally. It still handles roughly half of all global trade invoicing. No single challenger, not the yuan, not the euro, not gold, not crypto, comes anywhere near replacing it at current scale. But for the first time in 50 years, the machine has real competition. Not one giant challenger standing across the ring ready to fight. Something much harder to defend against. 1,000 small ones chipping away simultaneously from different directions. Bilateral currency deals, gold accumulation, alternative payment infrastructure, a founding petrodollar partner publicly reconsidering the terms. An energy transition quietly undermining the physical demand that made the whole system necessary. The up, and this is squarely finance misfires territory, isn't that the dollar is collapsing. It's that the American public has been kept almost entirely in the dark about the invisible system that's been subsidizing their economic lifestyle for 50 years. And about what it actually means if that subsidy gradually shrinks, because when the petrodollar weakens, borrowing costs rise, the dollar buys less globally, and the exorbitant privilege that lets America run deficits no other country could survive starts becoming a lot less exorbitant. That's not doom, that's just arithmetic. This is exactly what Finance Misfires is built to cover. The system's hiding in plain sight. The financial architecture most Americans were never taught to see. The deals made in Saudi deserts that shaped every dollar in your wallet for the last 50 years. If this one opens something up for you, drop a like, leave a comment with your take on where the petrodollar goes from here, and share this with someone who thinks the dollar's dominance is just a natural fact of life rather than a carefully engineered system with a very specific history. Subscribe to Finance Misfires for more breakdowns like this. The real mechanics behind the money, the power, and the systems that shape everything. I'm Jimmy. The deal was made in the desert. Now the sand is shifting. I'll see you in the next one.